So if you want to open a chocolate factory, one of the first things you're going to have to do is have a machine to help you make chocolate. I mean, chocolate is all about machines. And if you're a machine nerd like I am, it is a great part of the culinary world to be a part of. So today we're going to dig deep in how you source a chocolate machine, how you find those machines for your factory, and what works and what we found that doesn't work. So Melanie, what's the first thing you need to know about finding a chocolate machine?
Well, the first thing you need to know is what machine you're trying to find. You need to know what your product lineup's going to be, how much of that you plan to make. Some machines aren't required for some things. You can do things manually. Other things, you really need a machine if you're going to be efficient and if you're going to scale and you're going to be successful, because everybody's going to be successful, right? So they want to make sure they're set up from the very beginning. So first, you need to decide what you're making a lot of, and what that machine looks like, the functionality of it, and then figure out, okay, how do I get one of those? And I think people probably look at YouTube too and see chocolatiers using different machines and they go, I could really use one of those guys. Where the heck can I get it?
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I guess one thing at the beginning, we should say, if you want to start in the chocolate business, you don't really have to have machines. You theoretically could do this with a warmer and a few molds, right? But you're going to run into some pretty significant limitations. And Melanie kind of mentioned to it. One is going to be scaling. It's going to be really hard to scale.
Mhm.
And there's a little secret here. Making chocolate pretty and making it consistently, it's actually easier with a machine.
Absolutely, 100%. And again, I mean, just scaling wise, you only have so many muscles in your hands. And if you're trying to hand pipe and shell and do every single mold and you have an order for, 1,000 of them, sounds great. And you're really stoked the first time that happens and your adrenaline pushes you through. But then the second time they order, you go, man, I don't know if physically I can do it. You need a machine to do it. It's because you don't ever want to say no to an order. And there's great machinery out there that can help you, that's user friendly for the most part, if it's, plugged in and ready to go. But you got to find it first. So you look around, you look at, eBay and auction sites, and a lot of times you have to go European with it. We're over here in the States. We don't like to produce a lot of chocolate equipment. I don't know why, but we don't. So you go to Turkey or Italy or wherever and look for equipment. How
So
did you decide branding and what we were going to go with
so that's
here?
a great question. So I think a couple things I would think of, and maybe we do it like this. And the first thing is, like, let's start off like, if you're just getting started in the chocolate business, what do you need? And then we'll move up a little bit to, if you're a little bit more advanced, like, how do you take that next level? Because I think
Mhm.
most people are going to go in a logical progression. And then finally, when you actually open a factory like we have, you got to go big time because you're going to have to make a lot of products. So I would just say up front that if you were starting out today, you need a warmer, and not like one of these things you're going to buy at Walmart. You need to buy a really good warmer. And the one that we recommend is something called Mold Art. It's going to be like $600 or $800. You can find them used sometimes. They're made in Europe, but they keep chocolate at a really exact temperature. So you can we often call them melters, because you can put chocolate in it and let it melt. Now, it doesn't temper chocolate. In the old days, I used to temper the chocolate in the melter. But
Mhm.
today, I suspect you're gonna, when I ask you what's the most first thing you would buy, even if you were a young chocolatier to supplement melter, what would it be? You have an
Uh,
idea?
um, to supplement a
Yeah, if
melter,
you were gonna have a melter and you were gonna make chocolate tempering.
and I'm going to temper it, I'm
Yeah.
going to need a magic temper. I'm going to need a
Uh,
creamy cocoa butter so I can seed my chocolate and temper it a lot faster.
yeah. So when I first started making chocolate, like 30 years
Another
ago,
big investment too, right?
yes, it's a little bit more of an investment, but 30 years ago, the way you would temper chocolate in a melter is you would literally have to add fresh chocolate to it every time that was in temper. You would lower it down to temperature and you would stir it around, and then you would kind of pray that you had enough chocolate to do your job. But today, I always tell people the biggest innovation that's happened in chocolate in the last 20 years has been, we call it CCB, or creamy cocoa butter. But in the industry, it's called silk. And there's actually these machines that hold cocoa butter kind of soft and melted, but in temper. And you literally take a little bit of it, you stir it into your chocolate at the right temperature, and your chocolate's just magically in temper, which means you can have tempered chocolate anytime you want by simply just having a melter.
Right, and you hear on these forums and stuff, people talking about seeding chocolate, and I have noticed that new chocolatiers are like, "I don't understand what this seeding thing is. What am I seeding it with? What am I doing?" Well, you're seeding the crystallization of it, and so when you have that creamy cocoa butter, makes it you're seeding your chocolate, and it's just accelerating that process and getting you into temper quickly, efficiently. I mean, again, it's a little bit of an investment, but 1,000 times worth it.
Right. It was such a big deal for us, and we don't actually need it all the time, but we needed it so much that we actually have a professional version. But that magic
Mhm.
temper, you can not find them used very often, and I can't remember who makes them. They may be even a Canadian company, but you can get them on eBay or get them online.
Mhm.
But you're probably looking at, like Melanie said, it's going to be about $800,000 bucks. But to be honest with you, as a budding chocolatier, you will accelerate your learning journey with that way
Mhm.
faster than if you're trying to do it on your own. And just for quick tips, basically, you melt your chocolate to 40 degrees Celsius. You take out your bowl and you stir it around and let it cool to about 30. And you fold in literally about 1% of this little crystal and stir it around. Maybe a stick blender, and your chocolate's in temper. So
Mhm.
it is truly magic temper.
Life
It's
changing.
life changing.
Mhm.
So if we're going to go up from there, so let's say we did that, we started a chocolate business, and we're really making a lot of chocolate with just having nothing but a melter and a CCB. Okay. Next step up, what would you buy?
I would probably buy a tempering machine, like a constant temper. Sell me is what we use.
Right.
Love that. Don't have to do the whole seeding thing. Don't have to me, that would be next step up. I don't know if that's what you were thinking,
No,
but
I think it is.
okay.
So tempering machine, basically there's a bunch of them on the market. And the first one I had was a wheeled machine. And
Still have, by
I
the
still
way.
have it. We still have this machine. It's made by Mold Art. And I bought it because famous chocolatier Jacques Torres in New York, he literally took me by the hand and walked me over and said, this was the first machine that I needed to buy. And I bought it to his recommendation. I had it shipped over from Belgium, and I've had it ever since. But basically, these machines just hold chocolate melted, and they have a giant wheel that kind of spins up in the air, and then you can adjust the temperature over time, and it tempers the chocolate by changing the temperature, and incorporating movement, and you can make it. Now, it's not perfect, and it's hard to add additional chocolate to it. So we use something called continuous tempering. And that means all the chocolate's melted in the bottom, and a lot, like 25 kilos probably. It gets pumped up
Mhm.
through the back, cooled, and then shot out the top, tempered. So we can literally have tempered chocolate with a push of a button.
Mhm. Yeah, you've I know anybody who is in the industry and is even listening to this, it's because they have an interest in chocolate, and they've seen videos of people walking up to a machine, and they have a mold in their hand, and they don't show you, but they're stepping on a pedal and stopping the flow, filling the mold, and then releasing the pedal, removing the mold. That's a constant temper machine. That's the thing that is life changing also, especially since, I mean, I call you Father Time because you've been doing chocolate for so long, and I am relatively new to the game, but I'm spoiled. I love that. I love the fact that I get to learn how to do chocolate on nothing but sell me tempering machines. It's pretty great.
So here you enter the world of figuring out, where am I going to get a tempering machine? Well, there's a couple of options here. One, you can go directly to an American supplier of a European company.
Mhm.
And honestly, we did that a lot for our machines. So we went
Mhm.
through a company in Buffalo, New York called Tomric. And Tomric is a representative of Selmy, which is an Italian company. And we're going to talk a little later about the challenges of European machines, but you're kind of stuck because most of these machines are going to be European at this point. The other option, if you want more choices, is actually a local Texas company, TCF.
Great, great, great
Great
company.
people and amazingly smart. And you're often a little intimidated when you're buying these machines because they're costly. And both of these companies are really going to guide you into the machine that you need.
Mhm.
And that's if you're buying it new. If you're buying it used, Melanie was right. You could get on eBay, you can get on the auction sites, you can buy it used. I think it's the challenge is when you're starting out making chocolate, it's often more cost effective to buy it used. But the challenges with buying something used is you often don't get all the instructions. You don't know how to troubleshoot it. You
Right.
don't have a service person to help you set it up. And that becomes, again, a learning curve. I'm not saying it's bad because that's what I did, but it clearly is a little bit of a learning curve.
But you were in the industry for a long time too, and you already knew exactly what you wanted. You had basically a menu outline for what we were going to sell here and what we needed to scale. So I think as someone starting out, I mean, you just really touched on something very, very important, which is don't underestimate the value of purchasing a new item from a dealer who's hopefully near you and can offer support, answer questions, and help guide you. Because if you've never done it before, if you've never scaled before, we've said it before and we'll say it again. The chocolatier community is very small. We're all very friendly. Don't be afraid to ask questions on, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Is this the machine that I need? Whether it's a fellow chocolatier or if it's someone who is a distributor of equipment, they don't typically steer you in the wrong direction because they want to help you. They want you to succeed. Yes, they want you to buy something from them, and you should. I don't know that anyone should buy all of their equipment used for reasons that you just stated. You don't know for sure that it's going to work. You don't maybe have the manual on it to know even how to look up or troubleshoot what's happening with it. You need to establish a relationship with the distributor because they're going to be worth their weight in gold throughout your career to have that relationship because they'll answer questions and they'll help you out and steer you in the right way.
And I am older. And, back in the day, when I was learning chocolate, I worked in kitchens that had tempering machines. So it's like anything. What you learn on, you typically become more comfortable using. So I had used European machines, continuous tempering machines. I had used certain brands. So I kind of knew what I wanted. But today, I mentioned this on a previous podcast, but today people are learning on YouTube. And they often don't. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's fantastic to learn on YouTube. It's way more efficient than what I had to used to do. But you often don't get that first-hand experience of actually using something. So one little the little known fact that you may not know unless you really thought through it. If you go to one of these manufacturers, they almost all have test kitchens or they have demo machines, which you can go and learn. And again, it's not formal training, but we still take advantage of that. Melanie and I both have been to Buffalo and worked on a machine repeatedly on machines that we were not familiar with because we needed to see it in person. We needed to, troubleshoot it a little bit with them because we knew we were going to have to troubleshoot it when we got it back here.
Well, and they'll tell you all the things that you're not going to see anywhere else. They're going to tell you the downside of working with that particular machine. And maybe it's things that you've never, ever would dream of. Like if you have an enrober and it works fantastic and it uses paper, it's not just belt fed. Where do you get the paper from? How often is the paper available? Like little things like that can stop your production that you're not going to know buying a used machine on eBay. You talk to the distributor's going to say, oh yeah, this machine works fantastic, but you can't ever get the supplies for it. Or this is exactly what you need because even though the supplies are sometimes hard to come by, we stock them as frequently as we can and we'll take care of you. And again, that relationship comes into play.
So as a chocolatier, you can go from melter to tempering machine. And honestly, if you've got molds, you could scale and open a chocolate business. You could open a chocolate business with nothing but molds and probably a tempering machine, and you could scale pretty consistently. And there's a lot of people that do that. I think it's a pretty normal model. The next step up, though, is probably going to be adding an enrober. And that's basically a machine where you put stuff on the belt, the whole Lucy Ethel thing. You roll it through a wall of chocolate and you put chocolate on the outside of it. And it opens up a world of opportunity because then you are no longer dipping things. You have a lot of scale.
So much more efficient.
Way more efficient. But those machines are longer. They're bigger. They sometimes have to be provided more chocolate. So you may need to have a bigger tempering machine. So you might want to think about that when you're buying your tempering machine is how could I make that into an enrober? And a little bit more complexity. But the big issue there is you're going to start to enter into the world of planning your physical space and not just the machine, because now you're going to have extra power. That machine doesn't need air, but I would say air is an incredible part of our factory, and you're going to grow into requiring air. So that's something to think about too, is adding an enrober.
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't want an enrober? That makes life easier too. So when Dan and I first opened up the chocolate factory, he had a Hilliard's machine and it's fantastic. It was a great machine. I'm so grateful that I got the chance to learn on that machine, because then when we moved to sell me only, for enrobing and production, it was even easier. But now I know the inner workings of having, two separate melters, one for the top enrobing portion and one for the footer and like putting the base on the chocolates and the bottomer. And then it was attached to this really long cooling tunnel that it had to go through. And yeah, I mean, it was cool. It was fun. I'm glad we've, kind of grown up a little bit from that stage. But I think if you're starting out, I just had some ladies in the factory today that I met that had a little chocolate shop in Utah, and that's what they're using. I mean, she was blown away by the equipment that we had in there, but she has 2 Hilliard's melters, 2 big ones, and she's just trucking along and doing great.
So this is a really good segue, actually. So the Hilliard's machine was one of the very first machines I had, and I bought it used, literally 25 years ago. So that's how old the machine was, and it still worked. It worked
Mhm.
great. I bought it used at the time, and I bought it because a chocolatier from California told me that I should buy my first enrober with a machine that I could fix with parts from a True Value hardware store. And Hilliard's is
Great
manufactured
advice.
in Massachusetts. And honestly, when something broke on it, I could go find a part usually and put it together. When we opened the factory here and we needed a little more production out of that Hilliard's machine, I remember the owner of the company, who's now retired, but Jim Bourne drove down from Massachusetts. He brought us extra parts. He spiffed up our machine. They're a fantastic company,
Mhm.
Couldn't say enough about them. I ended up selling that machine for more than I paid for it 20 years. So that's a good kind of segue too, that chocolate machines typically hold their value. And that was
Mhm.
kind of a good thing. But great point. I think one analogy to that machine is it's like flying a Boeing 707. So it had a whole bunch of knobs, and every knob did something different, and it was nothing about it was automated. So you had to really, even though it was tempering for you, you had to know it would over temper and how to adjust the temperature, and you really had to get into your chocolate. That was the kind of thing about those machines. I think when Melanie said we went from that machine, which was 25 or 30 feet long, to a machine that's probably 12 to 15 feet long. And now it's like one button, right? It's like,
It's pretty
it's
easy.
pretty simple.
It's pretty easy, yeah. We needed the square footage in the factory too because we wanted to add more pieces of equipment. So, it wasn't that we just didn't like the Hilliards, it was we needed the square footage also.
The other take home message about machines is that we will talk about this in another episode, but making a molded chocolate is not just about putting chocolate in a mold and throwing it on the table.
Not at all.
It's more complicated to get it to look pretty. And the same is actually true with these other machines too. They're going to make the process of like enrobing a lot easy, but to get it perfect, it takes some dialing in and practice. So you're still going to have to go through a learning curve. These machines are not, oh my gosh, I'm buying an enrobing machine and now I'm going to have pretty Jock Torres looking chocolates out of New York coming out of that machine automatically.
Yeah,
It's
no,
gonna happen.
that doesn't
No,
happen.
it doesn't happen. You're still going to have a little bit of learning.
Yeah, no matter what machine you're using, it's still an art. You still have to pay attention, you have to go slow, you have to be consistent. You still have to really try. I mean, you're still creating a little piece of art. There is no way that any machine is just gonna crank out a completed product that's perfect unless it's a Reese's, and that's not the direction we're going because 'cause we're artisan chocolate makers.
Right. The next step up, probably. So let me just say this. You could run a hell of a successful chocolate business with a tempering machine and an enrober and a set of molds. You could launch a full-blown Shopify store with just having that equipment. You really don't need anything else. But you can start to add things on that will really make you more efficient. And I would say there's some technologically advanced machines that we'll kind of mention here. And then there's some just old school European style chocolate machines that have a huge role here. Let's start with old school German, the machines. And let's talk about the depositor. Tell me
Ooh.
about, what do you think about that machine? And tell people what that machine does. And can you imagine life without it?
Me personally, sure I can because I don't have to use the depositor on a daily basis. But as from a production standpoint, yeah, it's life changing. Again, you have to have, your molds and hopefully you had your tempering machine and you've shelled your molds. Now, if you make your ganache, you have to hand pipe every single one of those cavities, which is not a bad thing either. I mean, that's a great step, but if you're going to scale and you're going to take it to the next level, again, you don't want to turn that down that order of 1,000 bonbons because you just don't have the hand strength anymore to hand pipe all of those chocolates. So the depositor, great piece of machinery that allows you to make your ganache and put it in the top and pull a lever and it's going to deposit into each cavity exactly how much ganache you want in there and it changes your life. Now I will say too, it also changes your life at the end of your day when you have to clean that machine because there's no less than 1 billion little parts and gaskets and pieces that have to get taken apart because you're looking at, if you have a mold that's 8 rows across, you have 8 little pistons that you have to take apart and clean and do, and try not to lose any one of those pieces down the drain or bounce off on the floor or whatever. But once you get it down and you have a process in place of, I'm going to keep them all in this, basket or whatever, and put it back together once everything's dry, I mean, you're good to go. And it is life changing. And I told those ladies that today too, because they didn't have a depositor. And I was like, great investment right there.
Absolutely, because you can so that Melanie's point, you can pipe all your molds, but you're not, and you can get consistent with it. When you do 10,000 of them, you can make your molds, you can fill them all consistently, but it is painful. And there's an ergonomic reason why the depositor works. There's probably a scaling step, meaning that I would just say off the top of my head, you need to be depositing 2,000 grams of ganache at a time to make a depositor worthwhile. And honestly, it would probably be good if you were doing that over maybe 5 different chocolates. So let's say you were doing 10,000 grams of ganache in a day. That makes a depositor a really good investment, because you could literally easily, in fact, I think this morning at the chocolate factory, they probably did 3,000 or 4,000 chocolates, and they probably deposited them all. If you just looked at the depositing time, probably in about 40 minutes, right?
Yeah.
You would never be able to pipe that. So the scale factor is a big issue. And then, of course, on the other end of the spectrum, okay, from the depositor, which, by the way, we bought that from TCF. It's a German machine, going to have a little bit of production time. So plan that into your production schedule, but well worth it. Now, let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Then let's talk about technologically way of depositing. And that's the one-shot depositor.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So just for the people that are kind of new to chocolate, this is magic to me as chocolatier. I don't even think I envisioned this back when I was learning chocolate, but this machine actually dumps chocolate and filling in the mold at the same time. Kind of does this Hawaiian jiggle thing, and it kind of seals the top. And then it goes through a vertical cooling tunnel to actually cool the chocolate. So literally filling goes in, chocolate goes in, and finished chocolate comes out.
Yeah.
It's pretty magical.
All through the same nozzle. It's going to deposit your chocolate shell, fill your middle with ganache, and cap the top. All through one, with zero cross-contamination too, because it's basically a nozzle inside of a nozzle. So as long as you have enough molds to keep this machine going, enough chocolate melted and tempered to feed the beast, and you make ganache fast enough to fill the hopper in the top, oh my God, it's endless how many you can run through and make quickly.
Great machine. Melanie's the expert on this machine, but it, when you get more technologically advanced, obviously it becomes more challenging. And I would say, we even though as busy as we are, right, on the one-shot machine, we're still kind of on that window of whether or not we need the machine or not. Right? But
we're ready for that.
When you need the machine, you really, really, really need it, because it becomes almost impossible to do all those steps, because otherwise you're talking 2 to 3 day, steps to make a bonbon. Here you're talking about one.
Yeah.
One day you could do all of it, and you could do thousands of them at a time. So the scaling step is really strong. But with every one of these journeys, it requires a little bit more air. You might have to have commercial grade air for that machine, which you do.
You absolutely do.
You've got to have 3-phase power to your shop. So now you have to have commercial electricity. So if you were doing this out of your home or out of a side hustle, you may not necessarily have that. And it's going to require way more dialing in to get to work. So there's going to be things you're going to need to have learned in those first steps to say, okay, this isn't working. What's going wrong? And it becomes more of a challenge on the academic side to make it work.
It
not
does.
On the practical side.
But again, if you have not bought this machine used and you purchased it from a distributor, or even if you do find a machine that's used and you buy one, go take a class at a distributor and use this machine. Get a class from somebody who's a professional. It's going to save you probably a lot of gray hair and wrinkles and all the things from beating your head against the wall trying to figure out how to dial this machine in. You need to talk to somebody who is a professional about it. You need to take the class. You need to learn, and not just try to figure it out on your own, because these are very complicated machines, and there's 1,000 different things that you can dial in on it. And
it's your brain on one more little thing, just to let everybody know that we learned. I wouldn't say we learned the hard way. I knew this would be the case, but I did not anticipate the challenges of it. I thought, it'll be easy to fix. And that is your recipes that you used on your days when you were making a melter. and then all of a sudden you're depositing them by hand and you're piping them, and then you want to put them in a depositor, guess what? They may not deposit well at scale. And so you have a little more of a challenge. And I can almost guarantee you they won't deposit at scale in the one-shot machine.
Right.
So every one of those journeys is potentially going to require a recipe adjustment. And I don't think I anticipated that when we were looking at machines, because you think, oh, I'm just going to buy a bigger machine, turn it on. And, I know
Mhm.
you were real thoughtful. I know I'm going to have to adjust it. I don't think you ever think about, I'm going to have to adjust the recipe. My recipe may not work in there. And then you have to worry too, is it going to taste as good? Right.
Yeah, because when you're talking
Yeah.
about, is the recipe gonna work, you're talking about fluidity. In a one-shot machine, it has to have the exact right amount of fluidity in order for the ganache to not penetrate the shell that it's already deposited, because it is going all in at the same time. So you're absolutely right. You gotta adjust recipes, and I think we kinda might have glazed over that a little bit too when you're looking at what machines to buy. What recipes are you currently using, and are they going to be compatible with the machine that you're stepping up to? I think the other thing we also kind of glazed over, and we just keep mentioning molds here and there like it's no big deal. Molds are a huge deal. They're a huge investment. And if you're taking the next step as you go along and getting these bigger machines and these production lines going, you have to have enough molds to make it worth your time to invest in that machine and the money that you're investing in that machine, which again means you got to buy more molds, and they're expensive. And they also require a lot of real estate, because now you've purchased all these molds so that you can run this one-shot machine. You need, 200 of them if you're going to scale it and do it right. You got to have a place to store 200 of them. You have to have a way to be able to clean them efficiently. You got to think about all the components that go along with it. So you might be sitting at your computer going, "Oh my gosh, I'm on eBay and I see this one-shot machine and it's, greatly reduced, and I'm just going to buy it and cross my fingers and hope that it works because it says it's barely used." You got to think about all the components that go along with that, all the way down to the electricity that you talked about and your recipe development. So if you're purchasing from a distributor, again, they're going to take you by the hand, and they're probably going to give you a recipe book at the very beginning with some basics in it, so that then you can get creative and modify the flavors, but you have a jumping off point and you're not, again, beating your head against the wall thinking, I invested all this money and I can't get this machine to work.
Also, I think we've tried to lay out today a pretty logical progression, right? Because many of these things will build on themselves. And a good example is if you've got that CCB machine, the creamy cocoa butter, often you can use that to temper your ganaches or to temper giandujas that you're making. So there's some advantages to doing that, within your system. So you're kind of growing into that. If you're buying a tempering machine and maybe it's your first, maybe go a little bit bigger so that it'll work on your enrober, right? So you don't have to, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can incrementally add equipment, and you don't have to jump into a one shot. For instance, your molds that you have and you're learning on are probably not going to work on the one shot machine. I
Mm-mm.
don't think you need to buy one shot molds right out of the gate, but just keep that in mind that if you can start to just incrementally add elements into your machine stack, you can be more cost effective. And we're not always the smartest about doing that. I'll be honest with you. We've made mistakes where we've bought a machine and we look back and think, wow, we should have gone bigger. Rarely. Or sometimes we should have gone smaller. We're going to do a whole podcast on what I call the specialty chocolate machines, the things that only do kind of one job. And we're going to do a whole podcast on that because we have a whole lot of experience on those one job machines. So now we've got this stack. We talked a little bit about going to manufacturer. We talked about a little bit about eBay and buying used and things like that. So what are some challenges? We talked about the training part of it, but what are some of the
Mhm.
challenges of like European versus American?
Language for one. So you get this machine that's made in Italy and it's beautiful and it looks like, it's created by Elon Musk, and you're so excited about it and you turn it on and it throws an error code right away that's in
In Italian.
Italian, and you don't know what to do because the book is also in Italian and there's a little bit of English in there somewhere, but it just may not be in your native language. So what do you do then? You got to pick up the phone, you got to call tech support in Italy, who then they automatically assume you're a dumb American because you're calling them and you don't know how to use this machine, because it's a European machine. That all the way down to, again, buying from a distributor, when they receive the machines, they switch the electrical for you because am I wrong? Am I remembering incorrectly that these machines, when they get here, the 3-phase is actually backwards from ours
Well,
and they have to swap it, or
yeah,
I don't know.
it's complicated.
It is
What Melanie's
very.
telling you, and I think I can comfortably say this: if you add in a chocolate machine of anything above a simple tempering machine, it's not going to work when you plug it in. It's because there's some component either in your knowledge of the way that you programmed it and set it up, which is very likely because it's your first time doing this and you didn't have a lot of training, or there's a hookup instruction that was hooked up incorrectly, or there's something just wrong with the machine. And so you end up troubleshooting. And in fact, I used to tell people that in running a chocolate factory, you do 3 things. You clean all the time. You're always
Mhm.
cleaning. You are working on machines all the time, and then you're making chocolate a little bit.
Yeah.
And Melanie would add
Yeah.
in packaging. She would add in packaging part of it. But
Absolutely.
literally that part about working on it. So we actually have, matter of fact, Melanie just upgraded our tool stack. No, when I mean tool stack, I'm talking like our physical tools of gadgets and snaps and plugs and fuses and whatever. And, just to put it in perspective, I mean, I've driven to DFW airport to get a fuse for one of our Italian machines that had to be flown over. We've replaced circuit boards on machines because, only thing we could figure out was the circuit board was wrong.
Mhm.
We've had chocolatiers in other states that have been in the middle of a big production that have literally called like one of our distributors who knows we have a machine. I've gone in and taken a part off our machine, wrapped it in bubble wrap, and shipped it to the other chocolatier so they could put it in and finish their production run and then ship it
Mhm.
back to us. I know that sounds crazy, but our industry is small and we do that kind of stuff all the time. But the point is, you are going to have to learn to work on a machine.
Yeah,
And
and pro tip about that, if something breaks on your machine and you have to order a part and you can afford it, order 2 of those parts. Because if it went out once, it's likely gonna go out again, and the amount of time it takes to get it or even source it, if you can have a backup, something, replacement parts, by God, start that little stockpile.
yeah, and I'll tell you 2 little tips here too. Number 1, never ever throw away a part.
Yeah, just because you think it's broken.
Don't throw away a gasket. If they send you extra gaskets or I don't care. It's one of those things like you open up your drawer at home and you have these 5,000 buttons and they're stupid.
Mhm.
That is not true in chocolate factory. You need to have every available part available because you're going to have trouble. The second thing is when we opened, of course, this was pre-AI. I will say this, and this is a little tip for the AI folks out there. The AI works really, really, really well at like taking a picture of an Italian part and telling you what it is
Yeah.
and telling you how to troubleshoot it. So that's a couple things to kind of go through is that be aware that there's going to be a little bit of learning curve. So you can buy used. That's not a bad way to go, but you're going to have a little bit of learning curve related to it and maybe not a lot of support. And you're probably going to be forced to buy European. Now, let me talk a little bit about American chocolate machines. Hilliard's still around, so that company's still around. You can buy those machines. Savage Brothers in Chicago, an amazing
Remarkable.
100% brag on that company. They don't make, I don't think the tempering machines like we're talking about here. Maybe they do, but we don't have those. But there are American suppliers of American machines, which
Mhm.
have some advantages because the parts are easier to get. Often the getting support, people will travel to your shop to actually train you on the machines. And we'll talk about that in a future podcast too. But hopefully this has been helpful.
I think it has. I mean, these are some of the things that I wish people would have told me.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, then reach out to us. We try to answer all the comments that are in the comment section and like and subscribe our videos. Apparently, that really helps our algorithm. And subscribe to our podcast, which is on Spotify and all of the podcast platforms called Being to Business. And until next time, we'll dive into another chocolate topic.